And because I'm on 8.00,
I'm gonna be using the remote
firmware.
Lua loader to load this.
Same if you were on 8.20. Obviously, if you're using
You know the web browser method on older firmwares.
then the payload should be updated.
You can just load the browser and then select etaHEN
to run the latest version. If you're on the Blu-ray exploit or the remote Lua loader,
You can
update the etaHEN payload via a USB drive. And then once you have everything
You can
loaded,
then
load the etaHEN payload off the USB. Both the Blu-ray exploit from Victorious X and of course PLK autoloader support loading the payloads off a USB.
In my case,
I'm using the remote Lua loader. I'm gonna use the one from Master S9 here. And on the console itself, all I'm gonna do is run my Japanese game. That's used to load the Jailbreak. So when I run this, I'll get the remote Lua loader, which gives me the IP address that is listening on, which is 192.168.7.72. So I've got that entered here in the application port 9026. I can run the PS Labs exploit, which is the Jailbreak. And you can see there it loaded successfully. So once that's loaded, we can then load our ELF loader. And that will load the ELF loader on the PS5. As you can see there, that is now running. And then finally, all I need to do is load the etaHEN using payload. Another payload injector like Netcat GUI. I'll take the payload, drag it in, enter the IP address and port number and inject the payload. And that will get etaHEN started on my PS5 here on my 8.0 system. And again, this process is the same if you're on firmware 8.20. Okay, so once etaHEN we can go ahead and simply close out of our game that we used to load the Jailbreak. And we're now up and running with this latest version of etaHEN. So if I go into the settings and scroll down to our etaHEN toolbox, we've got all of the features added in here. So the first thing that's most obvious, the plugins option has been changed. So it's now called plugin/payload elves. This has been changed so that you can now load regular elf payloads from within the plugin section. Now, in previous versions, plugins were like a separate They were kind of supposed to be like a separate format. But they weren't really, they were just elf payloads that had her. And a few extra bytes at the beginning for the title of the plugin. But the file was essentially just an elf file. However, the plugins option would not accept regular elves. Now it will so. You can take any normal elf file that you can run as a payload on the PS5 and add it to etaHEN. So etaHEN can load it, or etaHEN can also just load it on startup. Regular ELF payloads can be added, essentially as plugins now to etaHEN, which is a pretty handy feature that's been included here. So just as an example, we can see if I go into my services settings, we do have the FTP server running by default. So I'll go ahead and add a payload in here that we can enable. So for instance, if I switch back over to my computer, we've got the PS5 payload dev repo with the web serve payload that can be used to run other types of homebrew applications and games and various things. So I can also download this ELF file here for that. So all I gotta do is connect via FTP. So I'll go ahead and open up an FTP client on my computer and enter the PS5's IP address in the host box 137 and quick connect. And then if I go into the data folder and then the etaHEN you can see folder, not only do we have the plugins where folder, the normal .plugins files go, we now have a payloads folder as well, where you can put the regular ELF payloads. So I'll go ahead and open that up and take payload in here and copy it in. I could do the same with our PSX or any other payload that I would want to be able to load within etaHEN. So with that now added, I can switch back over once again to our PS5. And then if I go into the plugin/payload else, you can see it now shows up. Now no version shows up because, of course, again, this is just an ELF file. It doesn't have those extra bytes to show the proper title and version number, which is what the .plugin versions would have. But it does show up in here, and I can just enable it to start running it directly on the console. Whenever you try to load ELF files within etaHEN, it does take a minute for it to start up, but you can of course add it to load automatically when etaHEN starts, so that you don't have to wait a while to load it like this. So we just give it a few extra seconds here for it to start up. And there we go, serving HTTP on the local host :8080. We can see the plugin or ELF file has been launched. And then I can go into the startup menu and set that to start automatically whenever loads, so that I don't have to load that separately. So that's another very feature that's been added here in this version of etaHEN. And if we check to make sure that's working, I can hop onto the homebrew launcher here. And you can see that the web server has started. So I can load my additional homebrew applications. Now, another thing that you'll also see that is missing in the option is a game error fix plugin that we had in previous versions. That feature has now been built within etaHEN itself. So it's baked into etaHEN, so it no longer requires the plugin when you load this version. If you had that plugin installed previously, it will just delete it. So it will no longer show up in the plugins menu because it's not needed anymore. It will automatically apply the error patch. So for instance, if I go into my PS5 Webmin Games section, we can see that I do have a game installed here. If I try to run that game off the USB, so it says it's launching the game, and it is again a PS5 game dump. But we no longer get those universal data registration error messages that would pop up previously. And on some games, it would just spam that error message continuously. That's what the plugin was designed to fix. But as you can see, those messages patched out automatically in this version and without having to apply a separate plugin in order to do so. So that's another feature that's been added there. Not only but the Webmin Games section itself that you can use to launch those games within. I believe it will check those locations. It will check the X directories, which are for those M.2 drives, or potentially external drives that are connected. So it will now check those for any of your PS5 so that those dumps will also appear in here. And you can launch them from within here as well. Whereas previous versions only check the USB and drive and the data folder on the internal storage. So that's also been added. Now, in addition to that, if we go into the settings, there's some more options added in here. We have display title IDs on the home menu. Works on retails, but will only show if the toolbox is active. So if we go ahead and enable this, you can see all of our applications now show the title ID. So that has now been added. So this is a feature I definitely appreciate. It's just very useful to see the title ID of your game, because different games have different title IDs. For like the European version, the US version, the Japanese version, any special editions of games will have a different title ID. And so when you're trying to download specific cheats or patches or, game updates, DLC, any of that kind of stuff, it's very handy to know exactly what the game that you're trying to install those things on, so that you can make sure you get the correct patch or whatever it is for that specific title. So it's just handy to be able to see that directly on the homepage. This feature, I believe, is already available in test kits or development kit consoles, but it's never really been available on retail consoles. But etaHEN has been able to unlock the feature for retail consoles, which is pretty handy. So we head back into the etaHEN toolbox. Here and we do have another feature, which is the etaHEN game options toggle. The etaHEN options in the game options menu. So if we go to one of our games and press the options button, can see we now have an etaHEN cheats which option will take you to the cheats that are installed for that title. So you can see all the cheats available here for on Black Ops 3. Particular patch, so that now shows up. Now, it does say that the title is not currently running, so you won't be able to activate any of these cheats unless it's just really to view the cheats that are available for a specific game, unless you're running that game, in which case you can use this menu to access the cheats, and then enable and disable any of the cheats that you want. So that's now been added. If you don't like that menu being augmented, you can turn that option off as well by going into the settings and unchecking that box. And then from there, if you go back and press options, you just get the normal options panel for the title. So that is another thing that's been added in there as well. Another feature, and then if we head back into our settings, I think that's most of it. We do have an auto eject on etaHEN start. Another feature that's been automatically ejects the inserted disk after etaHEN, which is useful for BDJ or Lua exploits. So yeah, for those people who want to eject the disk, once you've loaded the exploit, if you don't keep the disk in your console, then you can enable that option. So that's another feature added in there. Now, some of the options here have been shifted around a bit. For instance, the test kit menu has been moved to the bottom, since it doesn't apply to retails. So that one is just way down there at the bottom. And then we also have the debug app jailbreak notification. When that is enabled, whenever you load any homebrew applications, like if we load the homebrew store, for instance, and then we'll get the old message that pops up saying, the application with the process ID has been granted a jailbreak. That is what that notification is. It's just saying that it's been granted to Jailbreak. So that used to be something that was on all the time. On previous versions of etaHEN. But with this version of etaHEN, it is now an option that you can toggle on and off. Those are the main options. All of the obvious stuff that's been added here in this particular version of etaHEN. Now, of course, we do have a new version of Itemzflow as well, which you can also add. So you can download the latest Itemzflow from the homebrew store, of course, on the PS5 itself. Or you can simply go on your computer to gd-zone.com and find it in here in the top apps section, or over here. Select Itemzflow Game Manager and download for PS5. And then once that is downloaded, you can copy that over to a USB drive. Just copy it to the root of a USB. And then plug that USB into your PS5. Once we're back on the PS5, we can just head back into our etaHEN toolbox package installer. And we should have the package file showing up here. We can select it to install it. And we now have the latest version of Itemzflow installed. And of course, when we run it for the first time, update the plugin. So the Itemzflow XML plugin has been installed. Be sure to load it via the etaHEN toolbox before trying to use it. So that's now installed. An additional plugin, which is just the latest game patch plugin. And the XML patches has been added there. So this version of Itemzflow, really, there's a lot of small things that have been touched up here. But the main addition here is simply to the etaHEN home menu. Shortcuts, which is of course the ability to add the cheats media shortcut, the game's media shortcut, and the browser media shortcut, so that you can quickly access any website you want from shortcuts on the media section on the homepage. But there was no way to remove those shortcuts in previous Obviously, versions. You could do it manually by tweaking the database file. There wasn't a quick and convenient way to remove those shortcuts. Now there's remove games media shortcut. We can select that will get rid of it, and then remove cheats media shortcut. And then remove browser media shortcut. And that will get rid of those shortcuts. And then if we save settings and exit out, you can see if I go into the media section, we no longer have for the web browser, the cheats and the game's launcher. So honestly, I think Lightning Mods might be being a little bit modest when he says this is a small update for etaHEN. I mean, yes, there aren't any huge new features added in this version, but when you look at the changelog, you see all of the stuff that's been added here. I think it is a pretty substantial update overall. And then of course, the last thing as well that has been added here is the About section has been improved as well, with more things, so it says support the project. So you've got donation links for Lightning Mods. And then we've also got the etaHEN credits for the main developers. And all of the contributors and donators and everything all showing up here as well. And then we've got the projects included in etaHEN. So now shows all of the open and closed source projects that are used within etaHEN to give proper, creditation to everybody. Everyone's project that is being used here. So that is another good thing to see inside there as well. So yeah, that should pretty much do it for this video. The GitHub repo will be linked down in the video description with the download and the full